Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock, where love is our teaching and service is our prayer. If you are, I'm Margot, and I'm on the worship team, and I like to wash dishes.
Yay, Margot!
If you're a newcomer, we're glad you've chosen to come worship with us. And while you're here, we wish you would go by the table in the lobby and fill out a blue card so we'll know you are here and you have some information about our church. And we are so grateful today that we have a special speaker that is going to talk to us about embracing possibilities. And this is James Jensen Loving. She has an MA in ritual chant and song from the University of Limerick Island. She's a meditation teacher, a partner, a mom, and she is one of the disability support specialists. And I'm sure there's other things. She didn't tell me, but I wanted you to welcome James, and she will be speaking with us later. Now I invite our illuminator, Evelyn Webb, to come forward.
Yay!
Please light the chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is printed in your order of service.
I light this chalice with these words. Open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Open our minds to learn what is true. Open our hearts to love one another. Please join me in the affirmation of confident saying, Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of the truth is its sacrament, and the service is its prayer.
To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
So friends, thank you for joining me in creating some music during time all together. When you held that note, you touched base with one of the earliest music traditions that we have, and that is a drone. And while I talked about it in the context of Western musical history, basically every society in the world has music, and every society in the world has found this because it is inevitable. It is part of the physics of sound that when we hold this note and then we have stuff, there's space that opens and there is beauty that occurs that wouldn't otherwise. So thank you for joining me on that. And spoiler alert, I'm gonna ask you to do it again. So I hope that you'll join me. There is a practice in Benedictine monasticism called stabilitas, stability. It is one of the 3 vows a monk takes upon entering the community, alongside obedience and conversion of life. Stabilitas doesn't mean contentment. It doesn't mean believing that everything is fine or that the community you've committed to is without flaw. I can assure you these communities have plenty of flaws, as all communities do. It means something far more demanding than that. It means I will not leave when this gets hard. I will stay in this place with these people and work out whatever needs to be worked out here, rather than moving on in search of somewhere or something better. It means considering others when you make decisions because they affect the whole community. It means being there for your community members who may find themselves sick or otherwise vulnerable. We as a society often think of commitment like this within the bounds of matrimony, but it doesn't have to be only there. The monk doesn't take the vow of stability because the monastery is perfect. They take it because presence is the practice, because something only becomes possible when you commit to staying. This morning, what I want to suggest to you is that voting is an act of stabilitas for our community. We're not embracing optimism with this. We don't necessarily have confidence in the outcome. We don't even have faith that the system works at this point because we know often that it doesn't. Just the decision, repeated, unglamorous, sometimes grinding, to stay in the room and to keep showing up to the community you've made your life inside of, when you add your voice to it, you embrace the community and embrace possibility, whether the season is hopeful or not. I am a meditation instructor, and there's a word that I have been sitting with during meditation lately, and it is the word possibility. Again, not optimism. I want to be careful about that distinction because I think that it really matters right now in this moment. Optimism is a prediction, and it says things will get better. Possibility makes no such promise. Possibility simply says something can happen that hasn't happened yet. The space between what is and what could be is still wide open, just like that drone and that melody, friends. It's not guaranteed, but it's open, and there's room for us with much effort to perhaps shape the outcome. The monk in contemplation is not optimistic in any ordinary sense of that word. They are not necessarily expecting some divine revelation every single time they turn up at 3 a.m. They are maintaining the conditions, though, under which something might arrive. They show up at vigils before dawn, not because they are certain of an encounter with the divine, but because the practice requires presence, and presence is what makes the encounter possible. James Baldwin understood this differently, but ultimately he arrived at the same place. He wrote that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. That is not optimism. The monk in contemplation isn't optimistic, they're open. The voter who shows up in a difficult year isn't optimistic. They're maintaining the conditions for what might yet emerge. Possibility requires presence, friends, not certainty. As I said earlier, and as Margot so brilliantly introduced me, I spent some time in Ireland at the University of Limerick for my master's, and I was honored to do fieldwork and study with the monks of Glynstall Abbey, a Benedictine monastery in County Limerick. I'm not Catholic, at least not anymore, but I was still welcomed. And I have so many incredible, cherished memories of walking the grounds of that place and accessing what really felt like a primal peace on those grounds, sitting in lectures that the monks would give to me and my classmates, them taking us to a nearby stone circle to do a pagan ritual, yes, with Benedictine monks, yes, that did happen. But the monks inadvertently during that time gave me a question that I haven't really been able to get away from. You may be familiar with the term, the liturgy of the hours. In these monasteries, they sing in church services 8 times a day. They have lauds at dawn, they have vespers at dusk, compline before sleep. The schedule requires discipline and devotion, with so many services around the clock. A monk cannot even sleep for a full 8 hours before they're up to sing and pray again. This isn't necessarily because they feel like it. I have fond memories of, I'm going to not name him, but he worked in the kitchens, one of my monk friends, and we showed up one day at the monastery, and he just seemed a little flustered. He started talking to me and my classmates. He said, well, this was in October. He had been making Christmas puddings the day before, and if you've ever had an Irish Christmas pudding, you know it's quite a boozy affair. And so what my friend was doing was mixing the batter and, pouring some in a mold, and then, there'd be some on the counter because inevitably you drip batter while he'd swipe it, lick it. And by the end of making all those Christmas cakes, my friend was quite inebriated. And he still had to turn up and sing. So it doesn't always work out that you really feel like going and doing this. But the question that they gave me, what happens when you go anyway? The feeling of sacred presence is not always there. Maybe especially not when you have a massive Christmas pudding hangover. But when it's time, it's time. And the hour requires the voice, and the practice continues whether the inspiration does or not. I found that both humbling and clarifying. We tend to think of spiritual practice as something you do when moved. The monks treat it as something you do so that the moving becomes possible. My friend Marcia, whom I read earlier, was part of that world, which you wouldn't think about a Benedictine monastery. She was a Jewish woman who had made her life and career in New York, and she came to Ireland in her 60s to study in the same program that I was studying in. She was living off of a modest retirement income. She needed a place to live. The monks needed someone with her skills. She had worked as an innkeeper, and Glenstal, in true Benedictine fashion, welcomes many guests. And so, in the particular logic of Benedictine hospitality, it was worked out. A Jewish woman made her home in a Catholic monastery in rural Ireland, contributed what she had to give, and was received and embraced enthusiastically. This left her free to extend that hospitality herself. Me and my classmates spent many hours on Marcia's couch with her proclaiming herself our adoptive Jewish grandma. That's community. I want to be precise, though, about what I mean when I say she was received. The Benedictine rule, written in the 6th century, says simply, all guests who present themselves are to be welcomed as Christ. Not guests who share your tradition, not guests who believe what you believe, all guests. Can you show up? Can you contribute something? Can you participate in the life of this community in kind? Marcia could, and so she did. And she lived and prayed in her own way alongside men who prayed in another way entirely, and the community was able to hold all of that. That is stabilitas extended outward. But I want to name something we can too easily overlook. The stabilitas the monks practiced, that radical, unhurried presence, was not achieved by willpower alone. The monastery had a roof. It had land. It had a rule that ensured every member of the community had food, shelter, rest, and a role. Benedict was explicit about this. The abbot is responsible for the welfare of every soul in his care. No one was left to achieve stability while also scrambling to survive. The conditions for presence were provided. That is what made the practice possible. This is not incidental, it is the point. We do not ask people to pray on empty stomachs. We do not ask people to hold the drone while their housing is uncertain. Stabilitas, the capacity to show up, to stay, to contribute something to the common life, requires a foundation underneath it. The monks knew this. They built it into the structure of their community. And our government, at its best, should be doing the same thing. Not to tell people how to live, but to provide the conditions under which living and contributing and staying and showing up becomes possible. Social welfare is not charity. It is infrastructure, the drone beneath the melody of a free people. The Quakers understood something adjacent to stabilitas. George Fox and the early Friends didn't just develop a contemplative practice, they walked it into the world. They stood outside slave markets. They showed up at legislative sessions. They didn't shout or perform outrage. They just held still, bodily, collectively, unmovable, drone-like. This is a line I've heard before, and you might have too. I don't do politics, I'm protecting my peace. My friends, if you do not engage in the political process at all, you will soon find yourselves with no peace left to protect. I may have talked about voting as an act of stabilitas, but the truth is that civic engagement requires more than voting. Like the drone, our engagement must be continuous and not merely every 2 to 4 years. We must continuously work together, and we must continuously show up. James Baldwin embraced stabilitas from a different angle. He left America, spent much of his life in France, but he never stopped being accountable to this land. His exile was not abandonment, it was a different posture of witness. He wrote from Paris about what he saw when he looked back at his country with fresh eyes. His distance actually clarified his obligation. I'll confess my own complicated relationship with this idea. I'm a PhD candidate about to cross a border for my research, which is perhaps an odd position from which to preach stability. Nothing feels stable right now in my life, let me tell you. Whew. But I've come to think that stabilitas is not about geography. It's about not checking out. It is about staying in this. You can show up faithfully to the community in front of you and then show up faithfully to the next one. The practice travels, and the practice is, in fact, global. Some of you are tired. I sure am. Some of you have been showing up. You've been voting. You've been calling. You've been writing for years. And the ground keeps shifting underneath your feet. It's really frustrating. If we think back to time altogether and our drone, it can start to feel like that drone isn't holding anything, like there's nothing for that melody to rest on. If you will allow me, I would like to offer you a different frame. The drone is not in opposition to the complexity happening above it. It is what makes that complexity possible and what allows us to drive that complexity. As a singer who specialized in this music, the more chaotic the voices are above, the more the ground beneath matters because it gives us something to return to. It keeps everything from falling apart. Every choral singer in here can probably identify with that. Your own personal civic engagement might be the drone this season. It might be small, but it's measurable, it's consistent, and it is unmovable, and you are unshakable. That's not failure, that's infrastructure. Benedict describes the monastery as a schola, a school, not of theology, but a school of the Lord's service. The curriculum is showing up. The lesson is learned through repetition and not inspiration. And no matter what being we serve, we can adopt this to our own means. In an essay series I'm working on, I posit the following. When we go to vote, we should vote like a monk. Not because you're certain, not because you're inspired, but because it is time and the community requires your voice and the practice of staying. The long, unglamorous, faithful act of remaining in the room is what keeps the possibility open. Not the possibility of any particular outcome, just the possibility itself. The space between what is and what could be held open by people who choose to stay. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to hum with me again. If you choose to participate, which I hope you will, because otherwise it's going to be a real bummer, you will hum a single note in unison. You won't be the melody, you'll be the ground, and you'll be together. As Baldwin once examined America from afar, this also gives you a chance to consider the melody that will occur above from a new perspective, one of contemplation. And I want you to feel when you do that what it is to be the thing that makes something else possible. To be the condition, not the performance, to stay while the world moves, and to trust that your stability is not nothing, that it is, in fact, everything the melody needs to become what it is. Marcia Eager understood that. The monks of Glenstal understood that. The friends who stood outside the slave market understood that. Baldwin, writing from Paris, understood that. And I believe that we can understand it too. Now, I know there are beautiful voices in this room because I've heard so many of you. And what I'm about to ask may be the hardest thing of you today. You need to stay on the drone. I know you're going to want to go to that melody, but I need you to stay on that drone. I'm asking you to hold the note, not because the melody doesn't matter, but because we have so few opportunities in our world to practice being grounded and to practice the kind of presence that doesn't perform. This is civic contemplation, not a concert. There is nothing to prove here and nothing to display. What we are practicing right now in this moment with these voices is what it feels like to show up without needing to be heard over everyone else. And for those watching on live stream or even watching a recording later, you can still take part. We all have a part to play in this and in the larger picture, big, small, near, or far. Hold the note and really listen. Really listen to what emerges when you do. You may hear the music differently than you've ever heard it before, even if it's a song that's really familiar to you. I'll give you a big cutoff when we're at the end. You won't miss it. There's no need to worry. Breathe as you need, and then come back in. You can know that when you take a breath, there are others out here supporting you, and they're holding the note, so you can take a breath whenever you need. Just in life, like in life, we can take breaks, but we always must come back in and rejoin the song. One moment. I'm really poor on my hydration today. Can I come out here with y'all? Is that okay? It just feels weird to be up there and be doing something that's a civic meditation. I feel like I need to be down with y'all. Oh, you sound lovely. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. Now as we listen, I hope we understand, no human is illegal, we are on stolen land. And the wealth of this nation, the republic for which we stand, was built by the labor of enslaved black hands. And I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I've roamed and rambled, and I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. When the sun came shining and I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling, and the fog was lifting, a voice was chanting, this land was made for you and me. And I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on the sign it said, no trespassing, but on the other side it didn't say nothing. But this side was made for you and me. In the shadow of the steeple, I saw my people. By the relief office, I saw my people. As they stood there hungry, I stood there asking, Is this land made for you and me? No wannabe king can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Nobody living can ever make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. Thank you so much, friends. Friends, thank you all so much for having me again today. I want to give a special thanks to the Watt team for being so welcoming and letting me collaborate on this service. For a benediction, my friends, we embrace possibility. Oh, whoops, I skipped one. See, I'm new at this. For all of those visiting, I'm clearly not up here much, so come back sometime else when there's a better professional. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. Thank you, Evelyn. Yay, Evelyn! My friends, we embrace possibility when we embrace one another by consistently showing up and doing the work our community needs and requires. So mote that be, and amen.